Welcome to Sharing the Middle, where we share the messy middles of life. I'm Lacey, your friend in the middle and guide. My claim to fame this week is making it to the second trimester of my pregnancy. It's a lot, but we're making it. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Shannon Klein, and we get deep into health, chronic illness, motherhood, and I love it. You know, I love talking to someone else with chronic illness. I really think that you'll enjoy this talk between me and Shannon, and I am going to continue to do my best to get episodes out. I've got some really awesome interviews. Hope to talk to some other folks in my world too, but pregnant, tired Lacey is just doing her best. With that, let's jump into my chat with Shannon. Welcome to Sharing the Middle, Shannon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I usually like to start for people to actually introduce themselves because it's a lot better than me reading off of a script.
I am a lover of life. My name's Shannon Klein, but most people call me Shannon K. I'm a coach, so I help coach women, and that's what they call me. They're like, hey, Shannon K. So that's what I go by. Nobody ever says my actual last name. I really focus on podcasting and just encouraging, inspiring women. So that's like my day-to-day work, right? Because we're defined by roles in our society when we tell about ourselves. That's like my first passion. I have children, so I'm a wife, mom, lots of kids. I have grandkids. I work with education, adult education with a nonprofit. So just really living my dream life. And I know it sounds like I do a lot, but I do very little. And that's by design. Through my messy middle, I designed my life to do little so that I can enjoy life. So when people say, who are you? I'm a person that just enjoys life. That's who I am. That's my whole goal, focus of who I am.
I think that is awesome. And I also appreciate that you started off, I'm going to do the typical introduction, but then get into this is what's actually important to me. Because I agree. Like when somebody asks me, tell me about you, I'm like, I don't know what to start with. For so long, it was like, well, this is my job and that kind of stuff. And now my job is so many different things and all that stuff. So I understand. So when you first saw the messy middle or that kind of thing, I find people tend to have a really visceral reaction to it. So what was your initial reaction?
I thought it was very, like, the messy middle to me is a beautiful thing because my messy middle was very traumatic, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. So I feel like it's this paradox place where we can end up that takes us into just different things in life, right? So when I heard that, it's a beautiful thing to explore. I think these days and age, we don't want to explore the messy middle, right? We want to do the highlight reels, but life is not all highlight reels. Life is truly life. My messy middle to me was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was messy and it was a middle, but then I came out the other side.
Tell us about it. I am so excited. This sounds so much like me. I can't wait to hear the intricacies of it and that kind of stuff. So tell us about your messy middle.
I was that person, like talking about society and even how we introduce ourselves. I was that person who I had the great job. I'm moving up. I'm all the things that society says you're supposed to be for successful. That person that just works all the time and always looks busy. And that's what it is. And doing all the things for my kids and the birthday parties and the events and the Pinterest worthy life. House is always looking great. Like that person that's constantly go. And I truly identified with that person. That became my identity just through those habits in my life. And then I'll never forget it, June of 2020. And it was a rainy night. I live in Texas, and it was very rare to have rain in June. And it was cool and rainy and stormy, and it was just coming down. And I had my first episode of what I would later learn are many other episodes, just a sudden onset of what was a chronic illness. And I couldn't breathe. I kept telling my husband, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I thought I was having an anxiety attack. And so he took me and he threw the garage door open and he let the rain fall on my face, just trying to calm me down. And so nothing's working. I can't figure out what's going on. I'm just like, something's wrong with my throat. Something's wrong with my throat. I don't know what this is. And he takes me to the ER. Of course, it's like COVID time. Like COVID was very new at this time. They aren't trying to look in my throat. They're from across the room in the in the ER. He says, say, ah, like the doctor wasn't even close to me. And he's not, I don't really see anything. Maybe you're having an allergic reaction, all this stuff. So my life just changed forever in that moment. Like it would never have been the same. It never was the same from that moment. And I went to many doctors and they told me that I was crazy. They told me you're nuts. Like, you just have anxiety, you have depression. Everybody's suffering with that stuff right now. Let's get you on some depression medication. And I was really being gaslit. And what really happened was I was feeling like I was choking all the time. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't eat. It felt like somebody was just squeezing my throat closed. So I wouldn't eat. Then I just had this fear of eating. And then I thought I was crazy, but I was just too scared to eat. So finally, because my regular doctor was like booked up, and I
Mm-hmm.
finally got in to see her in August, like the end of August, beginning of September of 2020. And I'm like, all these telehealth doctors, ER doctors, I had been to the ER a few times since then, and they're telling me I'm crazy. So I just need help because I'm also trying to take these depression medications, but nothing's working. I can't get
Yeah.
off my couch. And I was just paralyzed in fear. It's so hard to describe the feeling of what it's like, but I try and tell people it's like somebody has their hand wrapped around your throat all the time. And sometimes it's worse and sometimes it's better. And I have no idea what's happening to me. And she said, maybe something really is going on with you. Let's just send you to a specialist just in case before we say
Yeah.
it's just in your head. So I go to an ENT and he's, wow, you have all this scar tissue in your throat and all this stuff. And I see stuff's coming up. Let's get you on some antacid. Maybe you have reflux. And I came home that day and I told my husband, oh my God, I have reflux. I was so happy. So I was like, I'm not in my head.
Yeah.
You're so happy you have reflux? I'm like, yeah. He says, let's send you off to the next specialist. And so I go through all these tests, all these procedures, and it comes to find out my esophagus muscles have just suddenly stopped working. They collapse on each other, which is this choking feeling I'm feeling. The bottom muscles push up, the top muscles push down. Everything's getting stuck in my middle. They're getting stuck in my middle. And then the muscles at the bottom aren't holding anything in the stomach. So stuff's coming up. I'm regurgitating, stomach acid's coming up all the time. Like all this stuff is happening and I'm still not eating and I still can't eat food. And I have all this trauma around trying to swallow stuff because I wasn't nuts. Something was in my throat. It was there. It was stuck. All this time, it was like I was choking without the gasping, choking thing, but I was choking. So I was like, now what? And I get different medications. I have different procedures done on my neck. And I keep losing weight during all this time. So before this, I was slightly overweight, like for my size. I'm a small person. So overweight for me, for most people, is normal because I'm short. So I'm about 140 pounds and I keep losing weight. I can't eat. I fall into malnutrition. So now I'm at a stage where they're trying to fix it where I can get nutrients. But now I have malnutrition. I have no energy. I'm 101 pounds. And I have about maybe six hours of energy a day. Can't get out of bed. I'm just exhausted. That busy person that I was no longer exists. I'm having this existential crisis as if I don't matter in this world anymore. I'm useless. What can I do? And it got to a point where I just had to sit with myself. And there's so many things that go on with, I think, illness. I talk about the illness part of it, the medical part. But for me, a big part of it was I had to finally stop and sit with myself in life and be in my own head. And it was quiet and I could no longer ignore. And I had to heal my inner self. And to me, when you say like the messy middle, there was all this physical stuff going on. And that stuff was the bad stuff, right? The thing that made it hard every day. But then there was this other part that was becoming very beautiful. For the first time in my life, I learned to love myself just for authentically who I am. Like I didn't have to be anything. I didn't have to fill a role. I didn't have to conform to anything because all I could do was go to work and come home and get in my bed. That's all I could do and just be there. And so it was transformative. It was like the messy part is that it's a lot of faith and it's a lot of self-discovery and it's a lot of an inner journey. And even though I have my family around me, so supportive, like my kids, they just blow my mind all the time. They're all older except one. Like I'm going to be an empty nester next year. I just have the baby at home. During that, like they were just how they really just pulled for me. So I had that support. And even when you have support, though, on the inside, it still can feel very lonely.
Absolutely.
And so I was in this lonely place and I thought, gosh, this feels so lonely. And that's really I learned to love me and really find who I am and find what I want. But also in all this, the beautiful thing was I just had to stop. The world changed because I noticed all the really cool conversations I was missing with my kids because I was too busy being busy. And I realized the sunsets I didn't see and just relaxing on the porch, all these parts of life that we just zoom by because we're busy. And I'm like, this is life. This is life all around me. And I realized the biggest change for me was I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that person. I can't go back to that person who's always going, which was hard for me because the hustle culture, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to
Oh,
work more to
absolutely.
make more to have this good life. And so through my journey, and I know everybody's journey is different and people find solace. When you're going through medical stuff, you find solace somewhere in something. And my solace was finding manifestation. I found manifestation and just how can I work on my thoughts? How can I work on my self-worth? How can I work on my inner world and let that be reflected in my outer world? Because I know what I want to feel like. Now I just need that to happen outside of me. And so I really tapped into that and I decided I don't have to work more. I'm going to work less and I'm going to make more. Like I just made this decision. It took a long time. I think a lot of people think you just wishfully think stuff and it makes it happen. It doesn't. All of this was a road, but it was a decision. It's making this decision and sticking with it and believing in it. And I believe what you believe, what you believe you can have. So I said, how can this happen? I don't know how this can happen. I just opened myself up to these new opportunities. It was really about opening myself up to a different world, a world where people actually do just chill and they work some and they do what they like, but then they just do all this other stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
I want to tap into that. And so it was like this whole transformation of myself. So as time goes on, I'm 101 pounds now. I have malnutrition and I'm just weak. And my doctor finally said, nothing we're doing is working. We're going to have to put you on a feeding tube for the rest of your life. You need a feeding tube because if not, you're just going to wither away. You're not going to be here. And I'm a very stubborn person. I am. I'm stubborn. I think stubbornness gets a bad rap, but stubbornness can really take you a long way. So I don't accept that. I don't want that. I don't want it. I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And he was like, we're going to have to. I said, give me 1 month. Give me 1 month to gain a little bit of weight, just 1 month. And so I started working on doing different things with my puree foods and things like that. Because by that time, I had enough procedures that I could have puree food. So I was basically eating baby food. Woohoo, fun. I'm sitting here, baked beans, anybody? Yeah, as long as they're like completely liquefied. So I said, just give me a month. And I worked so hard. Like I put all of my efforts into, I'm going to gain weight. So then I go back, I'm 102 pounds. He goes, okay, you're 102. He said, if you ever drop below 100, we're not having this conversation anymore, which now that I think back to this, I always had a choice, but I see where I said it. But he's, we're not going to have it under 100 pounds. And so I said, I want to eat again. I don't want to live my life not eating. Because another thing I realized is food is very important. Like for social time and family time, like we do a lot of stuff with food. And then when you can't do anything with food, you feel very left out. If I'm going to put food in my body, what's the best way to do this? And he says, okay, you're going to eat mashed potatoes, then maybe some chunky mashed potatoes. If you want to try it, we can do this. But if this happens, you need to stop immediately. And you can't have, I love salad and things like that. He's, you can't have vegetables because they have this waxy skin on them. That could be very bad for you. So I started and then I did like soft, solid food. And I just started working my way up. And I'm still on all these medications. But finally, the end of my story, this is a long, like 3-year story. But at the end, I can eat now. They told me I would never eat again. And now I eat solid food. I enjoy it. I'm off all of my medications. I slowly had them weaning me. Yeah, I slowly told him, take me off of all of my medications because I don't want to live like this. They made me tired. They mess with other functions in my body. And I said, I want to be medication free. I want to eat. I got up to 125 pounds. And I'm eating. Now, I still stay away from the spicy stuff, even though I like it, just a little bit every now and then, but not a lot. Because I'm like, I love it. I got to have a little bit.
Especially in Texas. You guys have a lot of good spicy stuff.
We really do. And I moved to Texas and I was like, this is good. I want more. And so I'm like, I don't want to give that up. And for probably like, I went on a bender. Like once I finally knew I could eat. And because with anything, like your stomach's going to shrink, right? So I hadn't eaten for so long. My stomach was small. So if you got me a combo from Sonic, I could only eat probably like a fourth to a half of the burger. And I was too full. Whatever. I stretched my stomach back out and I was like, I finished a whole Sonic meal. I was so proud of myself. And then I was like, I'm eating everything. I'm buying Cheesecake Factory every night for dessert. And I just went on this bender and I ate all the food in the world. Like now, of course, I'm trying to like get back in balance. It's like, girl, put good things in your body. But I was like, I'm tasting everything. It's almost like a kid. Like for the very first time, I'm experiencing this because I forgot it. It was almost like getting high. Like when people say they love food or they're addicted to food, I really feel like that can be true. Now, it was like when I would eat things, it gave me this euphoric feeling, this food in my body. It was very euphoric. And I was like, wow. But going through all this, it just taught me so much. Like it taught me that I'm going to be me and I'm going to not be these other people that everybody wants me to be. And I'm literally going to enjoy life. And people who knew me before and now, they're like, you're so different. And I think when you go through something like that, and I came out on the other side, and I'm so grateful for that because I wasn't ready to be somebody. I didn't want that to be the rest of my life. I have a whole lot more life to live, learning to love myself so fiercely. And I think it's something that we're not taught. Like what I realized, like laying in my bed, I realized
not at
just
all.
tell you all the things you need to improve about yourself or what you could do better or what you're missing. And it was this beautiful, so it is messy. It was so messy because it was very depressing. And I had depression. I had those things going on. I did.
You did.
Right? It's so messy. And I think it's messy because it's good and bad and up and down and all around. And it's a whirlwind. But I really feel like once I embraced it, once I said, okay, this is where I am. This is what's going on. I'm going to love myself through this. There was a time, a good friend of mine, none of my clothes were fitting me. And I was like, none of my clothes fit, but I don't want to go shopping because the thought of buying smaller clothes just reminded me of my sickness. And she said, you have to just love your body wherever it is, in whatever stage that's in, and just go love your body and it'll be okay. And so once I started buying clothes to dress my body and started to embrace, okay, I'm changing, but I'm just going to embrace the change for whatever it is. That really just set off something in me that says, okay, we can love ourselves in the good. We can love ourselves in the hard. We can love ourselves when we don't know what to do. And when we do know what to do, we can just love ourselves wherever we are. And I think that's what you learn in the middle. It's coming from one place and you're not quite at a place you want to be. That's for darn sure. You're not at that end point, right? It's this in-between space of just being and picking all those parts of where you're being. So it just taught me so much about me. And I think sometimes we hyper focus so much on what's going wrong that it's hard for us to think what is going right or what can I get out of this. And I've always been like, the cup is overflowing. Like it's not even half full, it's overflowing. There's nothing in the cup, it's overflowing. That's always been my thing. But I'm like, what can I get from this? I think I also learned that sometimes in life, maybe it's good if people just stop and sit with themselves and be with yourself.
If you have a few minutes today, if you could take a moment and review Sharing the Middle, that would be such a huge help. Reviews help people find us and show that Sharing the Middle is a podcast worth listening to, which obviously I think it is. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, head on over to Sharing the Middle homepage and you can leave a 5-star review. Thanks for your support. You're like 2 years ahead of me in your journey. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my future. I'm so excited. But just a few months ago, I had this moment of, oh, I don't wish to be the girl I was before I got chronically ill. Like I look at her like she's like my little sister. She's cute. I appreciate her for what she was, but I don't want to be her, which was one of the most liberating things that I had ever like consciously thought of, because for so long I was fighting myself and thinking I wasn't, like all of these things were wrong with me. I'm good right here. It doesn't mean I like it 100%. I don't want to go back. And I think it's so profound what you said. We are never taught to like ourselves. We are always taught to, how can we be better? What does this other person have that we don't, or that kind of thing. It can be such a hamster wheel. That having a moment like that makes you stop can feel like a gift.
It really is. And when you talk about just like the freedom and when you realize when you're chronically ill, you just don't have the energy. I don't have the energy to fake it anymore. I don't have the energy to hold up pretense. When you're trying to like move through the world and be what other people want you to be, that takes a lot of energy. And then when you just don't have the energy for it, you're like, oh my gosh, what a relief. Like you don't realize how much you've been expending. And then you have this thing where it's, I don't have the energy for that. And even when I don't want to give it away that way anymore, I want my energy to be just me. Like it's so much easier to just be you in this world. You don't have to second guess yourself. And I think that's a blessing of chronic illness because you don't have that energy and it's okay to let that person go. You appreciate her. She served me well through many other trials and tribulations in my life. She served me well and I love her for that. But I noticed also that she did a lot of that because of other traumas and things she needed to heal from. And once I was able to heal, then I didn't have to. Most of us function in trauma responses through life, I think, is what we do. But once I was able to just stop and heal her, like you said, stopping that hamster wheel. And it's just, you don't have a choice. It's beautiful. But what I try to teach people now is don't wait until you don't have the choice, right? Because then you're going to be dealing with all this other stuff too. So that's what I really try to encourage the people that I work with to do. Do it now. Like the time is now. Don't wait until your world come crashing down on you. Because mine it changed in an instant. I could have never foresaw that. And they don't even know what caused it. They cannot figure it out. They thought it was a stroke. They tested. Nope, they don't know. It was just some random thing. So love your life now. Love yourself now.
It was interesting as you were talking. I actually have had some of the similar symptoms of like things feeling stuck in my throat. And that wasn't like the worst thing for me. But it's esophilic esophagitis. I can never say it's EOE, but essentially my throat produces too many cells and it created a really rigid pathway that food would get stuck. And I'm sure you know this, the minute that food stuck in you, like for me, it was eating, I didn't feel it yet. And then I would drink something and the water wouldn't go down. So when the water doesn't go down, it's got to come back up. And if you want to scare some people, run from a table in a Mexican restaurant while being like, take care of my kids. I got to spit stuff out and hopefully clear it up.
It will, yeah. So they narrowed mine down to dysphagia because that's about as close as it would get. And those medical terms are crazy, right?
Well,
like, what do they call it? I'm like, they call it this.
One of the big things too that I've learned in my journey, and I think you would, hearing you be like, they still don't know what it was. Diagnosis is nothing to do with what's actually going on with you. It's just a way for people to categorize you.
It really is. It really is.
And so what my main diagnosis ended up being is chronic fatigue syndrome, which is like this whole host of, could be this and this. But when I realized, I'm like, oh, you don't have any solutions for it. So you just needed to be able to give me a label. And then I'm now figuring out the right ways to take care of myself because of that. A diagnosis is important in a lot of ways, but it's also so arbitrary and sometimes not helpful.
We can't really do anything for you. The best they could do for me is I had medications that relaxed my throat muscles because my throat muscles would spasm. Like I could feel these like spasms. And so I had medication for spasms. I've had medication for the acid to reduce the acid because it would just come up. Like I tell people, you don't understand what it's like to go to sleep and you wake up and nothing's working. And stomach acid, I was blowing it out of my nose every morning. And so there's one thing is wrong with me because they have to put a label. Like there's one thing's wrong, but then there's all these subsequent things that happen. And I think it's different for everybody, right? Like everybody's little nuances that come out of that one big category that they have. Like I had the regurgitation and all of these things. I've had pain. It was so painful at times. And I feel like I know my experience because I experienced it. But if somebody told me that they had something else going on with them, I could only sympathize. I couldn't even empathize. And I could only imagine. Because I do sometimes feel like when people say, what's going on, what's wrong? When you say it out loud, it doesn't sound terrible. But when you're experiencing it, you don't understand. There's no words that I can give you to tell you how this truly feels. I can try to describe it. And I think even going to medical professionals, right? How do you feel? You describe it and you're like, it's like this. But it's because it's so hard to describe. When stuff like that happens, it's very traumatic. I think for a long time, I didn't want to say, oh, this was traumatic for me. But it was, especially in the beginning. It was very traumatic. I think now I can finally say, yeah, it was traumatic. Because at the time, I was just in it. When you're in that mess, you're just in it anyway. So now I can say it was probably one of the most traumatic things I've ever been through in my life. And I think what made it the most traumatizing is that it's your own body hurting you. Like other people have hurt
Mm.
me and caused me trauma, but it's like your own body attacking you. That's how I felt. I'm attacking me. I can do to stop it. That was like one of my lowest of lows, was just like feeling like I was at war with myself. And I just was trying to tell my body, like, get your act together. Stop this. It's like this helpless feeling. There's nowhere you can run. And you have to be there and you have to be with it. It can be very lonely. Even if you have support, it can be very lonely. You can feel like a burden. There's all these things that go through your mind. Yeah, right? Like the feeling like a burden.
All the time.
Caregiver, a teacher for 15 years. And I know what it's like being a caregiver and what that can take from you. And that I have my own kids, just doing the things. And I'm thinking, when you really have to care for somebody who's sick, like sick, it's just not normal. Like normal caretaking can take it out of you.
Absolutely.
But, my husband, make sure I was taking my medicine, make sure I'm trying to eat, make sure I'm doing all this. Everybody's always checking out. I'm like, I know that wears a person, that wears the other person down. And then you feel bad about that too.
I'm actually really curious about, so I have 2 small children. I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, and motherhood and my chronic illness is one of the most difficult parts for me because caretaking is a lot. Like you said, I saw this woman who, and now I wish I remembered her name so I could send people to her. She talked about how motherhood is a relationship, but being a mom is caretaking. And if you separate those 2 things out, you can really embrace motherhood and not like caretaking. I'm like, oh, I don't like caretaking. And for me, it's also important too that like I struggle with caretaking because I don't have the energy to do it. But I'm still a good mom. You know what I mean? I still have that good relationship with my kids. And so I'm curious, since your kids were older, like, how did that feel for you? I'm just curious if it was more emotionally difficult instead of like physically difficult.
I actually felt, because some of them were grown-ups at the time. Like one of my daughters was still at home. There's 6 of them all together. The older ones, they were on doing their own thing. The ones that were still at home, I actually felt like it brought us closer emotionally, because teenagers typically pull away from their parents. They
Absolutely.
want to do their thing. But my kids would come because I would go to work, I'd come home, I'd get in my bed. That was my life. I lived in my bed when I wasn't at work. And they would come and lay in bed with me every night and just talk to me. So I feel like it actually brought them closer to me in a way. I think they just felt really sorry for me. And I know they were worried about me, but they had the mind that they wanted to come spend time and sit with me. And they made an effort to do that. So I think it brought us closer. But what I will say is, during all that time, that's when I started having my grandbabies. And so I could see where you're coming from, because the medications I were on, the night medication, once I took it, dead to the world. You could not wake me up. I was done. I'll see you in 8 hours. And when my daughter had her baby, and then my other daughter had her baby, because I was still on those medications when my other daughter had her baby. One of the things I always wanted to do when my girls had children was to go over and help them through the night. All those hard parts at night when you're tired and all this stuff. And I couldn't. And they're very understanding. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I feel that in my soul for you.
Because I always wanted that. Like, it was like me, my husband, my kids. Like, I guess to me, it was always that dream that you see on TV where the mama comes and stays for the week and she helps clean up and cook. And I had any of that. I always had to do all of that on my own with my kids. And it's hard enough to do it on your own when you're healthy. And I wanted to be that help for my kids. And I felt really crappy that I couldn't. Like, that hurt my heart, because I was like, let me help you change a diaper, or just sit here so you can take a shower. So I was there during births, and I got to experience that with them, and like during the daytime. But other than that, I just wasn't very helpful. And so I could see, when you have you don't have this option, right? Lacey, like, you don't have the option. I had the option as a grandma to say, okay, he can come over here for 2 hours. I have 2 hours in me. But you don't have that option. Like, I tell them right now, I could not do that. Even to this day, I'm still getting my life back together. I'm still trying to get my health back together. Yeah, I gained weight, but I need to get healthy. There's a difference. How you look, your body doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. As far as, I need good foods and good nutrition and all this stuff. And I'm getting older. I try to blame it on my health instead of age. But I always tell them, like, once I got off all my medication, I'm like, okay, they can spend the night, but not if they still get up in the middle of the night. Because but it was just different things to tell them, this is my capacity. And once that capacity is gone, you got to come get your baby, or you got to ask your daddy if he's going to take over, because I can't. And for you, full-time mom, you can't be like, well, I ain't got the capacity right now. You know what I'm saying? You can't do that. And so definitely finding ways to navigate through that. I don't know how you do it, because
I have a fantastic partner. That's how I do it. My husband is wonderful. And I do have the mom that can show up and help, and she absolutely does, and I'm so thankful for that. But when you were talking about with your kids, that's what my kids do too, though. So it made me happy. Like, they'll come in randomly and lay with me and snuggle in, and they might bring a tablet and watch it, and I'm like, "That's fine," and we're just laying there together and that kind of stuff. So my son, he was 3 when I was first struggling, and we, like, came up with a song that we were doing cuddle chats, and so we called them cuddle chats and sing a song, that kind of stuff. There's something so beautiful about it being universal that was something that you got with your kids, because I agree, my kids chose to come lay with me. My kids are great chatters because I'm a great chatter, but it was another and it has made them more empathetic in a lot of ways, and I'm very proud of them for that.
Yeah, and I think as women in general, I think one of the things that I learned is that we take on so much of the responsibility of so many things, but like even
Mhm.
cultivating relationships, whether that's our kids, our spouses, just people in general. I think we're raised like the woman cultivates the relationship in those ways. Like you go see, do your kids need something? Do you want to talk? Do you want to? And I think this is a beautiful testament to say that you can actually sit back and receive. That's another thing that I learned too. Giving is beautiful. I love to give. But I gave so much, I had nothing left. And what I learned from this is that the receiving, and I think sometimes it's uncomfortable. Like for me, at first it was uncomfortable. I felt weird. Do you just pity me? You know, I say like these things. I felt weird about it. But then it allowed me to receive, and it allowed me to receive love that just came to me, right? Like I don't have to do anything. I don't have to clean stuff. I don't have to do cute things for like just genuine love. And it just really opened me up to the idea that I can receive, because I always had a hard time receiving like anything. And so it just really opened that up into me. And it's just this beautiful connection, right? It's so beautiful when like your kids come and they lay with you and it's like, they just want to be here with me. And it can make like the worst days, like it just makes you smile. Like
Yeah.
that's it right here.
First of all, thank you for sharing so openly. I just don't feel like we hear stories of chronic illness very often. Our society, and I don't want to say this like one is worse than the other, but like you hear a lot of stories when maybe somebody has a terminal illness or that kind of thing. But when it comes to chronic illness, people don't know how to deal with it because there's not an end. The entire thing is a messy middle, right? And so I just really appreciate when anyone with chronic illness talks about what that looked like for them and how they make it work and that kind of stuff, and really get to the other side, because it's, to me, like you have really gotten to the other side. I'm sure it's always going to be a worry and a concern for you that you're always going to be taking care of and managing, but you've gotten to a more livable place.
I really have. And I think at the end of the day, even if I was still eating puree food, or even if it had got to a point of having to get that feeding tube, I think coming out of it was more of the mental shift, right? Like, even if your physical never catches up. So I would say to anybody, if your physical never catches up, your mental, I believe it will, because my mental and where I felt, how I thought, and all of that healing that I went through, that happened before the medical condition improved. That happened when I was at my worst of my worst physically. And so I feel like there is always something to gain in even the worst of times. And the worst times of my life, from the time I was 5 until this happened, something always good came from it. I don't know. That's just me. That's just how I see life. I might have rose-colored glasses on, and I don't care. I'm going to wear them because it feels good to me. And there are going to be struggles. And I mean, I'm still working on things. I don't ever believe there's an end. There really never is an end. It is truly a journey, and you just walk your journey. You keep going. There's highs, there's lows, but just love it and love life. That's really what I got from this, is just stop worrying about the past, stop fixating on the future, and just be where you are in the present moment and enjoy everything around you that life just passes us by on. Because even with chronic illness, society as a whole is, no, we just need you to be productive for whatever we need you to be productive for. They don't want to acknowledge it, I think, because then it puts a kind of a wrench in different things in our society. But it's real and it's true. And our society, that's just me. I think society's a little too fast paced anyway. I don't think you're supposed to live this way. But when you add chronic illness into it, it makes it that much harder. I think there's sometimes people like, just get over it. Or I think I saw a video the other day about like someone going to the doctor and they're like, what's your pain level? You don't look like you're in your pain. You get used to the pain, right? People are suffering through every day and they don't look like it. but they are, because they're just going to show up with their best foot forward or whatever we want to call it. But they're truly in pain and trying to just make it.
I feel that was really good advice, but is another piece of advice you'd want to give?
I think what I would give specifically to a person who is in their messy middle, whatever they're experiencing, is to love yourself fiercely. And I want them to know that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself, for everybody around you, is to just love on you and be okay with where you are and just love every messy little part of it, whatever that is, because I really think you will find strength in the love that you have for yourself to move on and to get through and to just keep going through what you're going through because you love yourself. And you know what? I'm going to love myself. No matter what it feels like right now, I love me. And I think that love that we're not taught to give to ourselves is some of the best medicine that we can have, because sometimes it's all we have.
Thank you for chatting with me today. Where can people find, work with you, that kind of stuff?
So you can find me. I have 2 Instagram channels. One's Coaching with Shannon K. I have another one for my podcast, the Live Life Unapologetically podcast, at Shannon K Pod Talk. But mostly you can find me at Coaching with Shannon K on socials, or you can connect with me through the Live Life Unapologetically livelifeunapologetically.com has all of my information on there and how you can work with me and the different things that I offer.
And it'll be in show notes. People can always find it there too. Well, thank you for sharing the middle with me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for sharing the middle with me. As always, I hope you've been able to see a little bit of yourself in the story we shared today. Don't forget to follow, share, rate, review, and follow me on social media at Lacey Shares. You can always check out the Joyful Support Movement at joyfulsupportmovement.com and see all of the amazing goodness we have there, like No Shame in the Home Game, Pops of Joy, courses, resources, and of course, the Joyful Support Village. All right, now go out there and spread some joy.